With the smash hit video that was Rewind 2023, which achieved a meteoric 269 views, I wanted to make the follow-up, It's Rewind, every game that I've played in 2024. Now the previous video, it had some issues, I'll admit. Hashtuna508 put it best when he said,
"To be honest, there's a better things to do with your time. Some of the game you play seems to be not good. You really need to play games that are worth your time. I know everyone have their testing game, but pick the GIGOD ones."
So thanks to my lovely comments, I've put all my games of 2024 into a giant double ranking. First I've put them in order from worst to best, as well as a little tier list, from S all the way to shit. This keeps me honest, and you get to see the quality of the games I've played in 2024. So without further ado, let's get ourselves into the list. Also, one final thing. In 1959, the UK banned subliminal advertising, but YouTube is a wild and lawless place. So, I snuck a secret subliminal message into the middle of this video which will compel you to do what I want. Enjoy. Starting off strong with number 50, it's the worst game I played in 2024, and probably one of the worst games most people have ever played. Marvel's Avengers from 2020, developed by Crystal Dynamics, is, spoiler warning, an absolute piece of dog shit. Firstly, the game is no longer for sale, which should tell you everything you need to know. But if you never got around to playing Marvel's Avengers, here's what you missed out on. Unpolished, slapped together gameplay, attacks that feel weaker than a fart protruding from a piles-filled arsehole, over-confusing UI, and progression often locked behind paywalls. As a man who often sees the positive in games, there is little positive to be found. Maybe a small joy in feeling like a kid playing with his favourite toy superheroes, but that's about it. So where does this fit in the tier list? No surprise, it's in the shit tier. The difficulty with being a dad gamer is you don't often play games at the time of release. Case in point is Chronology, a puzzle platformer from 2014. I was 10 years behind on this one. And by the time I got around to playing it, the likes of Super Mario Wonder, Limbo, and Little Nightmares had all released, all superior games, but all with 10 more years of the industry learning from itself. So even though Chronology is low down on my list, it's still not terrible. Firstly, there's the price. I only paid 79p for it, which basically buys you nothing in today's economy. And for that, you get a rather short but well-crafted game. Nicely put together puzzles and enough charm to fill one of those medium-sized Beanie Babies. It's earning an A tier and a mild recommendation from me. If you ever find yourself with a spare 79 pence, give this one a go. No matter how many times I've tried, this dad was never able to get into the Assassin's Creed series. They feel janky and never really live up to the hype. If everything goes to plan as you're watching this, the trailer for Assassin's Creed 3 should be playing right now. And back in 2012, when I first saw it, I thought the game looked absolutely incredible. For whatever reason, I never really ended up playing Assassin's Creed 3 when it released, and I'm very glad I didn't. It's not that there isn't some fun gameplay here, it could just be that the game aged badly, or maybe I just don't like bum Creed games in general. However, the fact that I never paid full price for this makes me happy. I won't go into huge detail about what I don't like, but one thing pretty much sums this up. Why, in everything that's holy, do you get shot for standing on a roof? The people of New York must be incredibly precious about their tile work. Now, I'm not going to put it in the shit tier, but it's close. We've already established that I don't really like Assassin's Creed games. I like the idea of them, the concept, and it also called me perverse, I quite enjoy the Desmond sections. Anyway, the main redeeming factor here is the parkour. It's damn near perfect. There's a bit of a weak story floating around, but hanging out with the locals of the time is always fun. And Napoleon in Unity is spot on, hilarious, chubby, like most of my friendship group, me included. Now the downsides. Even 11 years after the launch, the game still crashes a lot. There's still bugs, and having to run through a dedicated Ubisoft launcher is like trying to open a tin with your penis. Painful and incredibly inefficient. You'd think that after all this time they could have cleaned that up, but once Ubisoft ship a game, they believe it's good enough. And in the case of Assassin's Creed Unity, it really isn't. So it's going in the E tier, and it's only this high because of how good that parkour feels. It's like slipping into your wife's silk nightie. You shouldn't really enjoy it, but you do. Watch Dogs Legion has its flaws. Giant watchdog bollock-sized flaws. Yet the fact that it's set in London gives it a huge pass from me. I must have spent hours either driving or letting the self-drive cars whiz me around the capital. Quick point, why has no other game done this before? It's incredibly cool that some semi-fast travel system is explained away by self-driving automobiles. I love it. The recruitment feature is genius. Having my hacker cell filled entirely with OAPs is spectacular. Now obviously it's got flaws, otherwise I'd have it much higher on my list. The reason it's quite low for me is personal. I hate experiences drawn out over many hours. It took me around 20 hours to complete, but it felt closer to 40. There are just too many samey missions, the story's bland, and sometimes hacking your way into a building just takes far too long. And when you get caught, it sucks harder than accidentally getting your gentleman caught in a Dyson. But it's set in London, so it climbs a tier, a solid E tier. Weirdly, whenever I've watched trophy hunters play the Ascent, it's been widely praised, and I just don't get it. When you first drop into Velis, a massive cyberpunk megacity, the twin-stick combat's solid. You're surrounded by beautiful visuals, particles bouncing off the bonds of every enemy as you run and gun your way through. But then the repetition sets in. Go to point A, kill the baddie, collect your reward, rinse and repeat until you're 12 hours in. You're questioning your life choices for trying to play every game in your Steam library. And rather than thinking about the story, you're thinking about, well, why did I even buy this game? I think I was drawn in by the top-down perspective. I love the Diablo series, even Diablo 3, which was, let's face it, pretty poor. But this one just misses the mark for me. And you know what? I'm writing this script in a cold office just before Christmas, and I'm putting this into the D tier. And nobody can persuade me otherwise. This one just didn't click for me. Rogue is a standalone DLC for Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, where you take on the role of the bad guy this time. It should be an absolute cracker, and it's built around arguably the best and definitely the most popular Assassin's Creed game. However, about 30% of the game is story. The rest's wrapped up in a collectathon and other pretty insignificant activities. Story-wise, it does act as a bridge between Black Flag and Unity, but a bit of a shitty bridge. Like that London bridge that ended up in Arizona. Not really worth your time, and you're standing on a landmark, sweating your tits off, feeling pretty pissed off because you're in America. E tier. Now Cloudpunk puts you in the seat of an Uber driver, traversing the wet yet neon city of the future. The gameplay of manoeuvring your hover car around is incredibly relaxing, and the stories are delightfully gripping. In places though, it feels like this is the depth of a child's paddling pool. Car customization leaves a lot to be desired, refilling your motor gets tedious, and eventually you do get sick of the constant pouring rain. Plus getting out of your car doesn't feel that great. However, what I'm about to do in this tier list is going to shock your tiny socks off. Even though it's very low down on my list, I'm putting it in the A tier. That way, you pay attention, you say something horrible in the comments, but some of you might actually go out and give Cloudpunk a go, because I really think you should, and I'm never going to regret giving it this hard of a recommendation. This really is what the terrible bullshit that was the Marvel Avengers game should have been. It's got a tight storyline, great dialogue, and combat that feels much better than the Avengers game, just not perfect. And there's so much to like here. With an absolute banger of a soundtrack, Guardians is visually striking, drawing you into a heartfelt adventure that perfectly captures the team's humour and chemistry. The writing is sharp, with constant banter that makes Guardians feel like a believable dysfunctional family. I probably should note that there's reports of game-breaking bugs. However, I played through Guardians of the Galaxy on the Steam Deck in the bath, and it was probably one of the best times I've ever had with my clothes off. For me, it's a solid B tier, but it can see all the games in the A tier from where it stands. It's a Ubisoft game, so naturally it's got its faults. The first being that even before you get yourself started, you have to deal with the giant bag of bollocks that is Ubisoft Connect. Once you're in, there's obvious similarities to Nintendo's smash hit Breath of the Wild, with some of the fun swapped out for endless collectibles. I'd say the game's main draw is also its biggest downfall. There's loads to do. But once you've been through all the variations a few times, you might find yourself begging for the end to come. The combat feels smooth though, and the little trial rooms, which are a direct rip-off from Zelda, they're incredibly satisfying to solve. Personally, I did kind of fall in love with this one, but if I want to keep my morals intact, I can't really put this any higher than a D tier. Before playing Kena Bridge of Spirits, I had no experience with Souls-like games, and I've been trying my bloody hardest to keep my gaming history that way. Why? Because I'm old, and my fingers aren't as fast as they used to be. Anyway, it feels like a bit of a mixed bag. Like letting your 2-year-old choose the pick and mix. It's mainly fudge and Smarties, and it cost you £11 bloody pounds. The art is absolutely incredible, and having the adorable Rot follow you around Pikmin style is a stroke of pure genius. The characters you come across are adorable, even if their interactions are a little fleeting. Plus the musical score is an absolute taste sensation for the ears. The combat can be enjoyable, if a little bit of a slog, and the parry timer is all over the place, and it makes you wish you were playing anything else. The skill tree feels uninspired, and some of the puzzles were dull. At the same time, uninspiring. Imagine that. Or don't if you treasure your sanity. But if you get a chance, this dark and cozy world is one I think everyone should visit at least once in their lives. As for the tiering, it's a tricky one. At the 40th position, there's loads of games ahead of it on the list. But I want to honour Kena Bridge of Spirits with an A tier, because thinking back, this charming game really caught this old man's attention. You know what? I just don't like Assassin's Creed games. With Black Flag hailed as the bastion of the series, and it's still all the way down here in 39th position. Now I will admit that the pirate setting is great, and the boat combat's compelling for a time, and the story is an adventurous romp, and we all enjoy a romp now, don't we, dads? But for me, it's still an Assassin's Creed game, and if you don't like Assassin's Creed games, then you aren't going to probably fall in love with Black Flag. Even though there are so many possibilities, it's marred by the usual trappings that I just kind of hate. However, I'm going to continue playing the series and see if I can find one that actually catches my attention. And who knows, if Ubisoft ever releases a remaster, I might even give that a go. Because we all know I'm never going to be playing Skull and Bones to experience modern day naval combat. Now I will put Black Flag in the B tier, and that's because I'm scared of the comment section and the lynchings that will inevitably follow. So this is a little bit awkward, but at this point, every game officially is better than Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Are you already typing out the angry comments? Perfect, let's continue. I had high hopes for A Hat in Time. I absolutely love 90s collectathons a la Banjo-Kazooie and the Spyro games, which coincidentally we'll get onto shortly. The games feel super clunky, the camera never seems to work the way I want to, and it's always clipping through the surroundings and zooming in way too fast. Also, the platforming feels inaccurate and clumsy. A Hat in Time almost discourages you from exploring because the levels are so cluttered and just fucking ugly. However, if you can power through the first hour and you get used to the controls and the camera, then the violent visuals become less offensive and you hit this sort of flow state, and A Hat in Time becomes a joy to play. You feel like you sat back in your bedroom in the 90s, just before Eurotrash is about to start. Life feels good again. It's a B tier. Now Assassin's Creed series, listen up. This is what a stealth game should be. Tight and to the point with a simple but competent story about revenge. Originally released back in 2012, when games were meant to be about fun and not 50 hours of padding before you got to the good shit, Mark of the Ninja sits solidly in the A tier for me. It provides a good amount of challenge without trying too hard to be obnoxiously difficult. Checkpoints are plentiful, which helps a lot. Despite having different costumes to unlock, once you've played through it, you've seen it all. Still, it's 20 hours plus of good fun, and being an older release, it gets hefty discounts quite frequently on Steam. So it's worth checking out if A, you're old like me, and B, you hate the Assassin's Creed series. Splinter Cell is an old arse game. It's 20 plus years old at this point, and those of us with rose-tinted spectacles, it's a tricky one to rate. This is the game that started it all, and it's only second to Chaos Theory in my opinion. Having now played through the full series, with those rose-tinted glasses firmly on, do yourself a favour for an enriched experience and download the Enhanced SC mod. This adds controller support, the ability to whistle, and open doors while carrying bodies, both of which weren't introduced until Pandora Tomorrow. You also get mission stats similar to Chaos Theory, but it's more difficult as you get penalised for knocking out guards, plus a series of different suits to select from, and a widescreen fix. Well, there's loads of other improvements that I'm not going to bore you with. Although, if you're old and decrepit like me, you might be turned off by downloading mods and tweaking a 20-year-old game. So if that's the case, why not watch a cozy little Let's Play with a brew in your hands? And trust me, even after all this time, Splinter Cell is still an A-tier game. If you're an aging man-child like myself, then there's two things you love: going to bed early and giant robot mechs. Now, I'm not massively into first-person shooters, but Titanfall 2 delivers on so many levels. Some might even describe it as a masterpiece. Now, I didn't touch the multiplayer part of the game, as that's not really my marmalade anymore, but the single-player campaign is hands down one of the best FPS stories I've ever experienced. There's heart-pounding action, clever time-bending mechanics, and an unbreakable Titan-pilot bond that reminds me of when my boy was born. The fluid movement with all that wall running and double jump action, massive Titan brawls, and fights that never feel stale. Also, the graphics still hold up beautifully, and I paid £2.50 for Titanfall, which feels like an absolute steal. Now, if you love shooters, or if you don't, frankly, drop everything you're doing and play this gem of a game. 10 out of 10, high recommendation from the Game Dad, and it's an easy A tier every day of the week. For regular viewers of the channel, all three of you, you know I love me some Game Maker's Toolkit. So when he announced he was releasing a game, I was all over it like a bloody rash. After watching Mark's developing series on YouTube, it was great to get my hands on the finished product. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes playing a content creator's game can cheat the system a little. But Mind Over Magnet is a fun little puzzle game, short and sweet, and potentially aimed at the younger end of the gaming market, whether intentional or not. Now, I'm going to drop Mind Over Magnet into the C tier, not because I don't love Mark, because I do, but because thousands of solo devs have done it better. I'm looking at you, Factorio, where I've spent countless hours growing the factory. However, I would recommend you give the developing series a watch, and if you enjoy that, then there are worse things you can do than give Mind Over Magnet a try. Subliminal message warning, subscribe to the channel. That is all. The second game in the Shadow of franchise, Shadow of War, is pretty bloody brilliant. Decapitation has never truly felt so good. Now the orc management system does feel a little bit weird, sort of like The Sims, with oddly more depth. And honestly, I could have done without it. Shadow of Mordor, the first game in the series, felt like it didn't really need a sequel. However, with great gameplay and absolutely stunning visuals, even to this day, you can't really feel mad that you're getting more of the same magic from Monolith Productions. The Nemesis system still shines and is easily the best part of the game. It's exciting to imagine what could have been done with future titles. Although now this seems super unlikely now that Monolith are no longer operating as a studio, after being killed by Warner Brothers, who are soon to be Netflix. Honestly, what is this world coming to? Talion and Celebrimbor remain strong characters, and their evolution is generally interesting. Nearly every other character around them is poorly written. The female characters in particular are shockingly bad. They're meant to be allies or central figures, yet they're consistently abrasive, insulting, entitled, and difficult to like. At times it makes the story hard to engage with, especially since so much of the narrative revolves around them. Story-wise, things become interesting towards the end of the game, the final mission to be specific, where the narrative takes a sharp upturn. But immediately afterwards, the game dumps you into an extremely grindy endgame. I wasn't willing to sink another 30 hours into Shadow of War just to unlock one last cutscene, so I just watched the true ending on YouTube instead. B tier. Now the year continues with me completing critically acclaimed games that were released about 100 years ago, and on my initial boot up, I thought Bayonetta was just a regular goon 'em up with hack and slash mechanics. Well, I was kind of wrong. Now the combat is perfect, even if you're terrible at it like me. The music's stunning, and every character is full of life. Bosses are unique, so with so many what the fucking hell is happening moments, you start to question what is Bayonetta actually about. But I promise, it's not just all cleavage and bums. You'll fall in love with every single little bit of Bayonetta. In fact, with every step you make through the game, you can't help but think about pulling your tiny Todger out and giving a little waggle, because it's such an insanely bizarre adventure and one of the best Devil May Cry style games I've ever played. It will absolutely have you gagging to play the sequels. There is a con. The cameraman is pissed while you try to keep track of all the crazy action on the screen, but it's an older game, so you can give it a pass if you like. A tier. Let's state the obvious. The game's called Mad Max. You play as Max, surviving by exploring the desert, fucking up other gang shit, upgrading your car, the magnum opus, and taking down enemy camps through a mix of hand-to-hand combat, high-speed vehicular battles, and the occasional sawn-off shotgun to the face. So Mad Max has everything a man could ask for. Cool, in air quotes, car customization, bare-knuckle fistfights, let's call them fistings, explosions in a car, explosions near a car,
Cool guys don't look at explosions,
and a gritty wasteland that makes you feel like the man your mother always told you that you would grow up to be. The hand-to-hand combat is incredible. You don't see grounded, weighty melee systems like this in video games anymore, and every punch feels like it connects, like you're beating the shit out of some poor sod. The cartooning and balancing is satisfying, and building up your magnum opus becomes its own obsession. The explosions,
they blow things up and then walk away.
the chases, the storms, all the action scenes look straight out of a movie and hit hard without fail. The main story is a bit shorter than I would have liked, but it's still solid. Honestly, you'll spend more time scavenging, upgrading your ride, and clearing out the map than actually progressing the plot. This isn't really a complaint, because the game loop is just that fun. The world feels alive in a dusty, broken way, and the setting captures that Mad Max vibe perfectly. If you're into cars, fighting homeless people on a Saturday night, post-apocalyptic worlds, aka Britain, or action movies, this game is for you, my friend. Now, there is one massive annoyance when it comes to Mad Max. As of now, getting every achievement on Steam is impossible. 2 of the challenges require you to collect scrap from online servers, but those servers shut down in 2022. And because of that, the achievement up to the task, which requires you completing all non-repeatable challenges, can't be earned normally, and the devs haven't fixed it and likely never will. So if you're into achievement hunting, and the game is that good you might actually want to achieve everything it has to offer, you legitimately can't, and it's a bit of a shame. But does it still get a perfect score from me? Yes. I'm putting Mad Max firmly in the S tier. Why? Because I can. What's that? Another Souls-like disguised as a cute game for children. Death's Door is a game. In fact, it's the 30th best game I played in 2024, and as a result, it has lots of upsides. The black and white visuals are beautiful and put out the perfect vibe for the "You Are a Reaper of Death" theme. Movement feels smooth, and as you might expect, the game's balls hard. Some things can be cheesed, but with 5 different weapons and 4 different abilities, there's a fair amount of tools at your fingertips, and you should be able to find a playstyle that you like and you can beat the game with. Death's Door roughly takes 12 hours or so to finish, and perhaps more if you want 100% it, which I didn't. And one of the main criticisms is there's no map, which makes traversal quite a bit of a chore, and you might have to backtrack to collect a lot of items. But once you learn the layout of the world, this doesn't become a problem anymore. And this is actually one of the charms of the game. Someone made that decision on purpose, boys and girls, and in the same vein as other Souls-likes, there's things the game never really tells you, so you're left to discover them on your own. Overall, the game's a joy to play, and with fun and witty dialogue, it's one that secures itself an A tier. Well done, Death's Door. Sorry, I can feel yourself getting angry already. BioShock Infinite is one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time. In 29th position, what in the IGN reviews is going on here? Well, let me explain. Firstly, I found the setting not only interesting but jaw-droppingly spectacular. The world of Columbia is stunning, and what's that I hear you say? Not a negative? Well, the negative is that the weakest part of BioShock Infinite was the game's story. In previous entries, the story was the bastion of the experience. Infinite? No, not so much. There feels like piles of missed potential and some serious story writing issues. Once you get about halfway through the game, you find yourself trying to barrel your way through the plot just so you can see the credits roll, and the gameplay leaves a lot to be desired. In fact, it's pretty repetitive, with Elizabeth often feeling like a burden to the player. So where do I put this on the tier list? I'm putting it in B tier. I want to put it lower down, but I fear I'll be touted as a fucking idiot who just doesn't get Infinite, but it really does feel like a fall from grace from the damn near perfect BioShock 1. Yeah, I get it, I'm old. Old enough to have enjoyed the originals on my Amiga when they first released, but when I fired up Return to Monkey Island for the first time, I thought it was just a remaster of the original. Oh, how I was wrong, dear viewer. Return to Monkey Island reminded me of last year's Psychonauts 2, in that every minute I was playing it, there was a bloody great big smile on my face. A really good feel-good game, nothing fancy, just fun characters, a quirky art style and some satisfying puzzles. Also, the way the hint book has been implemented should be an adventure game standard in my opinion. As I mentioned, Monkey Island was the defining adventure series of my childhood. The game is to me as close to as perfect as a point-and-click adventure as it gets. The second somehow managed to be even better, right up until that ending, which I bloody hate as a kid. Sadly, this has become a bit of a Ron Gilbert tradition. The voice acting's great, the humour often lands beautifully, and the music is absolutely terrific. One downside is that most of the puzzles are fairly mediocre, and once again the ending leans hard into a meta concept that could potentially upset some gamers. For me though, the Lights Up ending wasn't the worst Monkey Island series has ever seen, but it honestly could have been better, and I don't regret playing it, and I genuinely recommend it to any point-and-click adventure fan. I was going to stick this in the B tier. It was close to being an A, but it just missed that mark one too many times. Now I'm still a fan of Ron Gilbert and his legacy he's left behind. I just wish for once he'd leave the writer's room when it's time to pen the ending. Although, plot twist, S tier actually. Yeah, BioShock 2's higher than BioShock Infinite. Why, you ask? Because it's a better game. And finally, I get to play as a big daddy. Not just any daddy, but a big one. It's like this game was made for me. BioShock 2 does a great job expanding the lore of Rapture, and skillfully adds new storylines and characters not mentioned in the first game, without creating any contradictions. Compared to BioShock 1, the story here is more personal. It tackles the very complex questions of the relationship between the parent and a child, and through that main character and his daughter, the game shows that parents are role models for their children, even when they don't want to be. The story of Delta and Ellen are emotional and heartfelt, and it made me nearly cry. FYI, I still don't cry at games, as it takes a real-world tragedy to get these eyes moist. The gameplay's improved, and on the whole, more enjoyable than the original BioShock. You no longer have to switch between plasmids and weapons separately. They've removed the different toxin categories, and let's face it, the useless item crafting. The shooting feels much more satisfying, the graphics have improved, and the underwater city is dripping with even more atmosphere, if that's even possible. Now, what's the best weapon in BioShock 2? It's the drill, of course. When it hits, the impact feels like blood spurting from your victim, the slightly sexual moans release as they loudly slip away into death. BioShock 2 is just an all-round fantastic game to experience, which I'm putting into the A tier, because it's not perfect. The tower defense sections really didn't do it for me, but there's so much to love here. If you didn't like the first game for whatever reason, and even if you did, I'd recommend this even more. You absolutely should play BioShock 2. But being both a sequel and a prequel, it doesn't quite hit as hard as the original game, which is why, as I mentioned, it's still in the A tier. I'm going to come straight out and say it. Not only am I gay, I'm not gay, but I loved Batman Arkham Knight. Now, it doesn't quite reach the heady heights of the other two games in the rock-steady Batman trilogy, but do you know what? It's good. Batman Arkham Knight delivers the most compelling, complete Batman experience ever built. The combat is smooth and feels mighty and powerful. Gotham City looks dark and alive. Gliding across the city makes you feel like the actual Man-Bat. The story's emotional in places and intense in places, resulting in a game that makes you truly feel like the Dark Knight until the very end. I also found the side quests pretty interesting, and the game actually invites you to play as the Bat Detective. It truly is the ultimate billionaire who needs therapy but chose to buy a tank instead simulator. And if you want to see what happens when a developer actually puts effort into a PC port, eventually, buy Arkham Knight on Steam. And go and play it in the bath on the Steam Deck. A spectacularly sublime experience. And don't shoot me here, S tier. Come on, the Batmobile sections really aren't that bad. A must play even if you haven't played the other Arkham games yet. And why haven't you? P.S. I am Batman. Well, not really. My utility belt is just pockets filled with toddler snacks and wet wipes. Plus, both my parents are still alive. But in spirit, come on now. Perhaps it's because I've been married for over 10 years, but anime girls in skirts shorter than the number of retracted words in the Epstein files have never really appealed to me. But if a game is made by Platinum, it usually gets a pass. Action-packed from start to finish, Nier Automata blends a JRPG with a hack and slash. With an emotional yet compelling story packing such a gut punch, you won't want to talk to another human being for a while. The only letdown I can think of is the amount of times you need to play Nier Automata to see the true ending, which is why personally I can't give it an S tier, but it's still a bloody strong A tier. I never owned the original Xbox, yet a 20+ year old game with a, let's face it, bland protagonist makes it into my top 25 games of 2024. Rough around the edges compared to today's standards, Halo Infinite not included, I'm alright, but Halo's influence on future entries and other first-person shooters, it's all here. Combat-wise, Halo keeps you engaged for the most part, with the feeling of repetition only setting in towards the last hour or so of the campaign. The weapon variety is good for a game of its time, and most of the firefights and set pieces that you find yourself a Master Chief in are unforgettable. Even playing on normal difficulty, the game can be quite a challenge, especially for those older thumbs, and at times it's very frustrating. Now let's talk about the actual levels themselves. First off, this is a hard subject to talk about, as some of these locations are so set deep into my psyche. However, a large portion of the game's maps are quite repetitive, uninteresting, and sometimes painstakingly long for whatever reason. I'm looking at you, the library. And the only way to kill the boredom is to flip between the old and the new graphics settings every nanosecond. Plot-wise, we all know the story of Halo. It's quite a nice, high-concept idea that still keeps you interested even after all these years. It's a solid game overall, but it does leave you wanting to try some of the stronger entries in the series, like ODST or Halo Reach. Let's not forget the soundtrack of Halo Combat Evolved. It's surprising how hard this original soundtrack still slaps 25 years later. It fits the game's tone perfectly, and you could easily slip on some of the tracks into your wife's birthing playlist and she wouldn't notice. Warning, she will actually notice. You will get in trouble and you won't be allowed to call your son John, or Master, or Chief. S tier. I didn't actually think I liked Resident Evil games, which is probably why it's taken me 28 years to get around to playing them. After buying the humble Resident Evil bundle, 2024 and onwards were the years to play as many of these series as I could. For the most part, I'd be playing the remasters, and that's exactly what I did with Resi 1. It's not in the same style as the ultra-modern remakes that they've done for Resident Evil 2, 3 and 4, yet it's had a tasty facelift and a boob job, while keeping everything else that makes this one a classic. The fixed cameras are still there, the sandwiches made of Jill, and the absolutely diabolical voice acting, but it's still an S tier, because there is some absolute video game magic you just can't put your finger on. The locations are perfect and dripping in atmosphere, but you have to Google every bloody puzzle because they're so obscure. And you don't really care, because killing zombies feels so satisfying, and your anus hurts because of how gripping Resident Evil is. The characters are incredibly memorable, and the slow progression keeps you coming back for more. It's a perfect example of something that's way more than the sum of its parts. If for whatever reason you've never played this one, just do it for Wesker's sake. Tout it as a cozy open world. A short hike is designed for a lazy Sunday afternoon, where you have the log burner roaring and want to settle down with something short and sweet. There's a surprising amount of activity stacked into the small space that is Provincial Park. Fishing, digging shit up, watering flowers, boating, climbing, hunting for treasure, of which I found a grand total of 0. There's not a single inch of wasted space around Hawk Peak. And the music by Mark Sparling is simply fantastic. It swells in and really touches the senses, making you feel like exploring and give you the sense of wonder. And at other times it knows when to be quiet and let the natural ambience do the heavy lifting. The second to last track just before you hit the summit, with its sense of anticipation and adventure, that was my favourite. And the vertical freedom is a thumb sensation, stolen directly from the school of Breath of the Wild. Being able to glide down to the bottom feels exactly like being a dog with your head out of a moving car window. Woof. The game isn't perfect though, which is why I'm slotting this straight into the C tier. You only get one save file, which is pretty annoying if you happen to have children, and can't stand wiping stuff for obvious reasons. And the dialogue, it's a little cringeworthy, and phrases like "epic stuff man" and "you basic bitch" spouted at you from anthropomorphic animals. It makes you feel like you're stuck on the internet message board circa 2009 with no realistic way to escape. In conclusion, A Short Hike is a wondrously short game, giving you a few solid hours of wholesome fun and leaving you on a high. As you know, my preference is always a well-crafted indie, a 4 to 5 hour experience, rather than a 70 to 80 hour AAA experience that leaves me frothing at the brain because I already shot a bullet through it 2 hours ago. Wow, what a surprise! Another short but enjoyable experience makes it high up on the Game Dad tier list. Little Nightmares 2 inherits most of the flaws from its predecessor, shockingly called Little Nightmares 1, and to this day still suffers from significant gameplay and visual bugs. Some levels feel disjointed, and certain scenarios offer less margin for error than the previous game, leading to frequent deaths that disrupt the pacing as you spend countless hours removing a controller from your own anus. Yet despite the issues, it remains one of the best games I played in 2024. Little Nightmares 2 weaves a dark fairy tale, creating some of the freakiest depictions of a humanoid creature to ever see the light of day. Seriously, that old lady with a long neck still haunts me today. Normally that kind of neck would be fine if it were reserved for some kind of sexy goose. But in this instance, no thank you. Little Nightmares 2 is an exceptional game, one I can highly recommend, and I'm putting it firmly into the A tier. Now if only I could shake that image of a woman with 4 elbows, I might finally be able to sleep at night. In 2024, I played all 3 of the games in the Spyro trilogy, and spoiler alert, Spyro 1 was the best of the 3. It has a level-to-level formula that steadily increases in difficulty, testing your skills with loads of ball-busting high platforms designed to test your patience. It's also ridiculously fun to 100% the game. Anyway, that's enough about Spyro 1. This section's about Spyro 2, which in my opinion is the worst of the series, and here's why. It adds piles of completely unnecessary minigames, which are either dull as fuck or infuriating, and I hated them. They distract from the platforming greatness Spyro 1 created. And there is also a ridiculous amount of backtracking, only to be hit with yet more infuriating minigames. I'm sorry to keep comparing it to the original, but going back into Spyro 1's levels to clean up achievements felt like a joy. Not so much in the case of Spyro 2. I should also note that I played the trilogy as part of the Reignited collection, and what a wonder for the eyes they are. All 3 games. If you played the originals as a child, this is probably how you imagine them. Now Spyro 2 would be a C tier, but I'm going to bump it up to B because it's gorgeous in this collection. And sometimes a gorgeous thing, flaws and all, just get through life much easier.
She's a babe.
And sorry, that's just a fact of life. Spyro 3 is a clear improvement over Spyro 2, but it doesn't quite hit the high pure platforming nirvana of Spyro 1, which is why it lives here in the ranking. Yes, the minigames are back, but crucially they're mostly vehicle based, and for once that actually works. Most of the vehicles are genuinely fun to control, and even the non-vehicle minigames are merely boring at best, rather than the brain-melting rage inducers found in Spyro 2. That being said, there are still a few good stinkers. Escort missions can get in the bin, Yeti boxing is an affront to God, and the tank battle in the Egyptian level, whoever designed that needs to reflect quietly on their life's choices. Now where Spyro 3 really shines is variety. New playable characters are introduced, each with their own movesets and levels, or a section of a level, and are built specifically around their abilities. It adds freshness, without completely draining the core experience. Backtracking is also basically a non-issue, and there's only one instance per homeworld. But thanks to the donut-shaped level design, you can zip straight to the relevant character sections without faffing around. Minigames are largely confined to their own spaces, meaning the main levels can focus on that glorious platforming goodness. Bosses are almost as strong as Spyro's 2's, and the egg distribution is much better balanced, roughly half from exploration, half from the minigames. The result's a game that feels far less like a minigame theme park, and more like a proper platformer again. But it's not Spyro 1, it's close-ish. A tier. I bought Dave the Diver as one of my recommendations for my shiny new Steam Deck, and honestly, it fits the thing so perfectly it might as well have come pre-installed. The core loop is absolute magic. Dive into the inky blue depths by day, harpoon fish in the face, then run a sushi restaurant by night. It's simple, elegant, and deeply satisfying. Then, somewhere along the way, the developers clearly asked themselves, how many mechanics can we add in before this guy snaps? You'll be peacefully fishing one moment, and the next you're playing a rhythm game, raising a digital pet, crafting bespoke bait, dealing with the VIP customers, and pretending you care about making people happy. Every time I thought, right, that's enough systems now, the game appeared behind me and whispered, guess what? We've added another one. By the time I'd finished the main story, new mechanics were still unlocking, like the game was actively refusing to end out of spite. I dumped over 50 hours into Dave the Diver and don't regret a single second. It did, however, leave me with an overwhelming desire for fresh sushi, which I can't afford unless you lot subscribe, and a strong urge to book a diving trip, assuming I could still fit into the wetsuit. The genius here is that it's consistently fun from start to finish. The loop never collapses under its own weight, and it keeps feeding you just enough goals, story beats, and systems to stay addictive without becoming exhausting. A clever and confident, absurdly well-executed experience. S tier. Do they need to take the relatively simple, brutally satisfying combat of Doom 2016 and layer it with so many new systems that every fight feels like a GCSE exam with muscle memory? But hell, I'm glad they did. First couple of hours of Doom Eternal had me wondering if I'd ever actually played a video game before. I was juggling weapons, abilities, cooldowns, weapons, weak points, movement tech, and I was convinced Dementia had finally set in. Then something clicks. Suddenly you see the battlefield. You're moving with intent. You're chaining decisions at light speed, and it becomes an absolute rush. The depth these systems add genuinely elevates the experience above its predecessor. Everything feeds into everything else, and when you're fully kitted out, the game becomes a beautiful ballet of violence. Your heart is racing, you zip around like a crackhead, looking for his next hit of, crack. Yes, the opening hours can feel like a bit of a slog on repeat playthroughs, assuming you're someone with time for that sort of thing. But once the full arsenal is unlocked, phenomenal game. A tier. One thing you truly come to appreciate as a dad is alone time, which explains why my arse is currently resembling a sarlacc pit from all those hours spent hiding on the bog. So what better of a companion than a lonely, quiet game that sells solitude for the low price of $3.95? Far Changing Tides is a serene, emotionally weighted journey through a flooded, dying world. You play as a lone child wandering through the ruins of civilization, eventually bonding with a strange and multifunctional sailing vessel. Yes, it's weird, but stay with me. The ship becomes the emotional heart of the experience. It's not just transport, it's a living system you must consistently care for. Adjust the sails, manage wind, fuel engines, release steam pressure, repair components, dive underwater, and eventually submerge completely as the game crescendos towards its end. What emerges is a beautiful rhythm of action, stillness and reflection. Long stretches of sailing or drifting beneath the waves are broken up by short, thoughtful environmental puzzles. They never aim to frustrate, they encourage gentle experimentation, and each solution feels like uncovering another fragment of the world's forgotten story. Like its predecessor, which may or may not appear somewhere on this list, the experience is deeply solitary. But there's beauty in solitude, much like trying to have a peaceful crap without being asked for snacks. That said, it's not for everyone. The pacing is slow, intentionally so, and players craving constant action or complex puzzles may find it a little dull. Some ship management tasks can be repetitive, especially during salvage-heavy sections, but these quirks are part of the game's identity, not flaws to be ironed out. Ultimately, Far Changing Tides is a haunting, atmospheric voyage that provides adventure. It doesn't need combat, villains or noise, just mood, motion and the quiet hiss of steam. A very solid A tier. Lone Sails came before Changing Tides, and in my not-so-humble opinion, it's the better game, though only just. You could duct tape the two together and struggle to tell where one ends and the other begins. The game is simply lovely to play though. I remember watching part of a YouTube review, stopping halfway through and thinking, nope, I'm going to experience that myself. I'm very glad I did. Normally I despise resource management, but Lone Sails makes it calm, intuitive, and almost meditative. There's no stress, just gentle problem solving as you push forward. The environmental storytelling is sublime. Abandoned towers, that graveyard at the very start. Every location feels deliberate and quietly emotional. The art direction is frankly chef's kiss. As a creative, I like to pay close attention to a visual design, and this game absolutely nails it. The world never feels empty, even when nothing's happening. And I genuinely struggle to find negatives. Puzzles are straightforward, but they still make you think, and the pacing is perfect. Also, the music, hell's bells the music. It just lifts everything else up. At every moment I just felt immersed. The desolation never bored me. An easy, well-earned S tier. Let me be very clear right out the gate. Spyro the Dragon is brilliant. Not just good for its time, not charming if you squint, just straight up, capital B, brilliant. Playing Spyro via the Reignited trilogy feels like cracking open a time capsule. Like someone's gone back and replaced your childhood memories with the HD version your brain always thought they looked like. this is the ideal form of a remaster. Bright colours, crisp animations, and controls that just feel as tight as they did back when my spine didn't make any noise when I stood up. The level design is where Spyro 1 really flexes. Each world is clean, readable, and built around a simple but elegant idea. Here's a space, now learn how to move through it. There's a genuine sense of mastery as you go, especially when the game starts asking you to make longer glides, tighter jumps, and riskier charges. Those big open levels with towering platformers? Absolutely crack to my crack-addled brain. And yet, it's also one of the most satisfying games to 100%. There's something deeply comforting about hoovering up gems, rescuing dragons, and clearing a level until knowing you've absolutely rinsed it of all its content. No bloated side quests, no skill trees, just pure distilled platforming joy. I probably briefly should talk about the PC version, because Toys for Bob somehow managed to lovingly remaster a PS1 classic, and then ship it with one of the stupidest technical issues I've ever seen. If you're playing above 120 frames per second, Spyro starts to drift like he's had 3 pints and a bad divorce. Movement subtly slides, jumps feel off, and the game slowly gaslights you into thinking you've forgotten how to use a controller. And even better, in Alpine Ridge, the Green Wizard refuses to pull the wall down unless you cap the frame rate, sometimes all the way down to 30. 30 in 2024. This isn't just quirky. This isn't just PC gaming charm. This is a bug that should never have survived more than a week after launch. No one should have to dive into the frame rate settings on a Steam Deck just to finish a platformer from 1998. That said, and this matters, Spyro 1 is absolutely worth your time. Just be prepared to wrestle with settings like you're defusing the bomb on a bus, with Sandra Bullock's arse wiggling in your face, from Speed. And then there's the soundtrack. Stuart Copeland didn't just knock this one out of the park, he drop-kicked it into orbit. The music is beautiful. The music is playful, atmospheric, and endlessly hummable. Every world has its own identity, and the tracks seep into your brain in a way that only late 90s game music ever could. You don't just hear Spyro's soundtrack, it moves in rent-free. And Copeland wasn't just some random bloke they found with a MIDI keyboard. Outside of Spyro, he's best known as the drummer for The Police, the band. But he's also composed music for films like Rumblefish and Wall Street, TV shows like The Equalizer, and even other video games like Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare. The man's career is absolutely stacked, and somehow Spyro fits perfectly into it. So yes, frame rate nonsense aside, Spyro the Dragon remains one of the finest platforms ever made. Pure joy, no filler. S tier. And if you disagree, you're welcome to glide off a floating platform and miss by half an inch exactly like God intended. I never cry when playing video games. Not once. Not a heroic sacrifice. Not a doomed romance. Not even when a game kills the dog and plays sad piano music over the top. And To the Moon, it didn't make me cry either. Which is frankly more of an indication of me than the game, because if I wasn't a cold, heartless, emotional armoured bastard, this absolutely should have done the job. Going in, I genuinely thought the characters were a bit corny, the dialogue was slightly stiff, an earnest quality that immediately dates it, because yes, it was written over a decade ago. And at first it shows. Conversations feel a little bit too on the nose, a little too written, if you like, and the game's trying very hard to make sure you get the point. But here's the thing. Because what To the Moon actually delivers is something quite devastating. A love story that transcends memory itself, not the glossy soulmate as a destiny sense, but in the messy human kind, the one where love survives miscommunication, regret, and the erosion of time. The kind of story the idea of soulmates was always meant to describe before the internet got hold of it and ruined everything. If you've watched and loved Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, the game is operating in the same emotional orbit, memories being written, intentions colliding with reality. The question of whether changing the past actually fixes anything, or just changes the shape of the pain. Mechanically, let's be honest, this is barely a game. It's an interactive movie with light puzzles, simple movement, and systems that mostly exist to pace the story. You're not here for the challenge, you're here to walk, to listen, and to slowly realise what this game's doing to you. And that's fine. It's more than fine, actually, because by the time the credits roll, you're not thinking about the mechanics or the puzzle design. You're thinking about the moments you've missed, the words you didn't say, and whether you'd rewrite your own life to give someone else a better ending, even if you never got to remember it. So yeah, if you're already hovering over the buy button for To the Moon, stop pretending you need one more review and just buy it. Help Johnny reach the moon. S tier. Emotionally devastating, mechanically simple, and proof that sometimes the quietest games hit the hardest, even if you are dead inside. Playing Psychonauts in 2024 is a bit of an assault on the eyes. It looks like there isn't a smooth edge in the building, and the colours are more muddy than mud itself. Psychonauts is a 3D platformer that has absolutely no right being this good. Going in, I expected a fairly standard affair. Serviceable platforming, a generic collection loop, some mildly amusing dialogue, and a quirky story doing most of the heavy lifting. And to be fair, it is all of those things, just done on a level with creativity and confidence that completely embarrassed any other games trying to be Psychonauts. When Psychonauts first came out in 2005, and I first played it in 2024, yet it still blew me away. The level design, the lore, the oh-nauts, all of it feels more inventive than most modern platformers that cost 10 times as much and say absolutely nothing. Mechanically, Psychonauts starts off quite simple, but as you unlock more psychic powers, the game opens up in a genuinely interesting way. You're constantly switching abilities, depending on the situation, different enemies, different bosses, different problems. It keeps things fresh without ever turning into ability overload. And then there's the levitation ball, easily one of my favourite gadgets in any 3D platformer. It completely breaks the game. Large chunks of the platforming become laughably easy once you have it, and I just love that. It feels intentional, like the developers knew exactly how powerful it was and just said, yeah, go and have some fun. That said, the platforming itself is probably the weakest part of the game. It doesn't really evolve much over time, and the controls can be, well, temperamental. The double jump in particular occasionally decides it simply doesn't fancy working today, which leads to some deeply unfair deaths. This is less Mario and more Mario, oh for fuck's sake. And then we have the level design. Here we go. This should be mandatory homework for anyone thinking about becoming a game designer. Every single mind has its own identity, visual language, and mechanical twist. Some I adore, some less so. Fuck that meat circus. But every single one is unforgettable. From the very first tutorial mind, nothing looks, sounds, or feels the same. And the Milkman conspiracy level is legendary for a reason. The idea of exploring people's minds sounds like a nightmare to execute. Everyone thinks differently after all, yet Psychonauts absolutely nails it. Even the collectibles make sense. No random feathers, no arbitrary nonsense. Everything you collect is tied to the mental concepts. Emotional baggage literally being emotional baggage is both clever and genuinely funny. And yet, talking about funny, this game is bloody hilarious. The writing is sharp, the characters are absurd, and nothing is sacred. The game relentlessly mocks itself, the genre, and its own cast. The psychic summer camp, full of deeply weird, aggressively horny children, is treated exactly with the same self-awareness as it deserves. I don't think I've laughed harder at a game than the first time Mr. Pokelope opened his mouth. And what really elevates Psychonauts, though, is the contrast. Beneath all the jokes and the cartoon weirdness are some seriously dark themes. Repressed trauma, guilt, abuse, loss. Every mind has a shadowy corner full of memories that the owner desperately wants to forget, and the game doesn't shy away from that. And that willingness to go dark is what gives the humour weight and the story staying power. Without it, Psychonauts would still be funny, but it just wouldn't be anywhere near as memorable. Visually, the game kind of holds up, and that's mainly thanks to its art direction. The raw graphics are dated, absolutely, and as I mentioned, they really hurt my bloody eyes. Every character is instantly recognisable, and I found myself talking to everyone I could. I never skipped any dialogue, which for me is basically unheard of, due to my very short attention span, which is powered by the internet. There's loads of collectibles, arguably too many, but I enjoyed hunting them down, not just for completion's sake, but because they tie directly into the levelling and progression. If I had to really nitpick, and well, I do, the final level is absolute dogshit in terms of design. It feels like the thoughtful level designers were briefly replaced by sadistic bullies with a vendetta against joy, but that's honestly my only major complaint. Overall, Psychonauts hit me in a way I never expected. Again, the looks this childish and playful had no business being this smart, this funny, and this emotionally sharp. It's probably one of my favourite 3D platformers of all time. It's an S tier, and I can't wait to finally get stuck into the sequel, which, according to this timeline, I'll probably get around to in 2045. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why? Why has, and let's be honest here, a subpar at best Metroidvania with guns made it this high up my Games of the Year list? Well, frankly, it's for pure nostalgic reasons. It was the height of the Xbox 360 era, I was huddled into halls at uni, and while my friends were out getting absolutely paralytic on Mandy, I was sitting indoors trying to rescue my imaginary girlfriend from a maniacal bad guy. Now, Shadow Complex is plagued with bugs and a story so boring you kind of wish you were up to your eyeballs in ecstasy just to stay awake. But never underestimate the power of nostalgia. The iconic power-ups, the satisfying run-and-gun gameplay has been coming back to this one over and over again. Now, let's go full Digital Foundry for just 1 second, baby. As a port, yeah, it's solid. It runs smoothly for the most part, with the occasional frame drop here and there, but nothing that actually ruins the experience. I did spot one enemy clip through the wall, but honestly, that was just more funny than annoying. I played it start to finish again recently, and had zero real issues. which is more than can be said for a lot of modern releases with 10 times the budget. My one genuine gripe is the crosshair on the late game weapons. It's this weird light grey just sort of melts into the background. Bright explosions everywhere, screen full of chaos, and the game decides this is the moment to give you an unreadable aiming reticle. Bit of an odd choice that. Presentation-wise though, it's strong stuff. The voice acting goes harder than it has any right to. Yes, it's that guy from the Uncharted games who gets involved. And yes, it absolutely shows. The performances carry the tone nicely without tipping into self-parody. And graphically, for an Xbox arcade title, and for the so-called remaster, I'll be honest, if they've done anything beyond bumping up the resolution, I couldn't tell you what it was. It looks basically identical, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but let's not pretend this was some sort of transformative overhaul. Gameplay-wise, look, it's not reinventing the wheel. If you played Contra, you feel right at home. But it takes the formula and cranks it up to an almost ridiculous degree. Faster, louder, and more aggressive. It's familiar, but executed with enough confidence and flair to make it feel like its own thing. I do desperately wish it got its own sequel. I'd even take a proper remake. But honestly, a sequel would be perfect. And sadly, it's been far too long now, which is a real shame, because it feels like a series that could have gone places. Still, at its current low price point, it's an absolute no-brainer. And apparently there's DLC too, which I only discovered was right in this script. So yeah, that one's on me. A cracking arcade-era throwback that deserved more love than it got. Now in good conscience, I can't give Shadow Complex any higher than a C tier, but it still nearly makes my top 10 games of the year. Absolutely wild stuff. Superliminal is basically based on the same core idea as my number one game for this year. The difference is simple, it doesn't quite stick the landing, which is why it's hovering right on the edge of my top 10, looking slightly nervous. Let's deal with the negatives first. It's short, probably too short. So if you're after a 500-hour lifestyle commitment that slowly ruins your marriage, this isn't it. And outside of its central gimmick, there isn't a huge amount going on mechanically. But that gimmick, scaling objects by perspective is pure witchcraft. You pick something up, change how big it looks, and suddenly it obeys new quantum laws of reality. And the game absolutely commits to it, wringing every possible idea out of the mechanic for its entire runtime. There's real magic in the code. The kind that makes you grin like an idiot when a solution just clicks. If you played the Stanley Parable, you already know the tone. Dry humour, playful narration, and puzzles that mess with your expectations more than your reflexes. It's clever, confident, and leaves you wanting more. Which is exactly where a short game should land. It's an S tier, as in Superliminal, obviously. Chances are I was a fisherman in a past life. I like open water, quiet isolation, and just staring off into the abyss. So when Dredge came along, it feels less like a game and more like a coming home to a place I've never actually lived. There's something deeply satisfying about the slow exploration of the sea, hauling in fish by day, and accidentally dredging up unspeakable horrors by night. And the Diablo-style inventory management alone is enough to make my brain sing, where you carefully fit strange writhing creatures into a grid like some sort of eldritch Tetris. And the game loop's immaculate. Fish, upgrade your boat, uncover secrets, meet the deeply unsettling locals, repeat. And hunting down rare creatures and ticking off quests never gets old. The atmosphere is thick enough to spread on your toast. And I like this one so much I bought and played all the DLC without hesitation, which should tell you everything you need to know about it. If you enjoy loneliness, salty air, and the cosmic nightmares lurking just beneath the surface, get your hooks into Dredge. It's a bloody solid A tier. This is the closest that I've come to exercise in years. Ascent is all about climbing. Slow, deliberately hammering pitons into rock, managing stamina.
It's Junction 13 is just murder, isn't it? Total gridlock this morning.
And occasionally plummeting to your death because you forgot to breathe out properly. And somehow it's incredibly soothing. It's a short experience, which by now you know is very much my thing. Ascent scratches that Journey-esque style itch, telling an emotional story without saying a single word. No dialogue, no expedition dumps. Just environment, movement, vibes. Now, I didn't cry at the end, obviously, I'm not an animal, but it does have atmosphere in spades. The world feels ancient and melancholic, with just enough narrative breadcrumbs to keep you climbing. The goal's simple, keep going up. And that restraint is its greatest strength. Yes, it's linear, but it's not a flaw. Sometimes a developer wants to carefully curate an experience, and here Don't Nod absolutely nailed it. It's not quite an S tier, but it's sitting proudly at the very top of the A tiers. My second favourite puzzle game of the year, Cocoon, is a glorious, brain-melting world-within-worlds experience from the minds behind Limbo and Inside, which already puts it squarely in my wheelhouse. Minimal failure states, no stress, and puzzles that make you feel far more intelligent than you actually are. If you want to feel clever as fuck with minimal effort, Cocoon has you covered. The mechanics are introduced perfectly. No hand-holding, but never unfair. Each new idea builds naturally on the last, and the way the worlds fold into each other is endlessly satisfying. The art direction is stunning, blending organic and mechanical elements into environments. It just feels alien, yet strangely coherent. My only real critique is the puzzles are on the easy side. They're rarely challenging, but they're always rewarding, which is an important distinction. And because it's fairly short, I'd probably recommend grabbing it on a sale, although it's absolutely worth your time regardless. And for a debut game from Danish studio Geometric Interactive, this is outrageously confident. It's not quite an S tier, but it's about as close as you can get without actually stepping over the line. It's a high A tier. I love Braid. Always have, always will. And the only reason it isn't my number one this year is because this is the 4th time I've played through it. And at some point, even perfection becomes familiar. Now you play as Tim, chasing a princess, bending time, and slowly realising that maybe, just maybe, you're not the hero of this story. Or maybe you are. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Ooh, spooky shit. Everything about Braid is exceptional. The painted art style, the haunting music, and the puzzles that don't just test your brain but actively mess with your understanding of cause and effect. It's a game where mechanics and theme are inseparable. And the Anniversary Edition is exactly what this kind of release should be. Sharper visuals, full modern compatibility, and an enormous amount of developer commentary that gives you insight into the game's design is just fascinating stuff. It's an easy S tier, no debate. Now I just need to invent a time-bending device so I can visit a universe where Braid got a sequel. If you don't know Fallout New Vegas, then no, you're not a gamer. It's not gatekeeping, it's just a fact. The game sits comfortably on most people's best RPGs ever list, and honestly, it deserves it. I came to it late, which means yes, it feels a bit dated. It's janky, it's buggy, and hearing Chandler Bing's vocal calls every time someone speaks does occasionally rip me out of the immersion, and yet, it's absolutely phenomenal. The story grabs you immediately and refuses to let go until the house inevitably wins. The world's dense with memorable locations, brilliant quests, and that slightly unhinged Fallout humour that no one else quite nails. Almost every quest gives you a genuine choice. And not a fake dialogue wheel choice, but real, this will actually change how the world reacts to your choice, even if you don't always notice. And the Vegas setting is absolutely perfect. It's laid back, strange, eerie when it wants to be, and alive in a way very few RPGs manage. Wander off the main path and you're almost guaranteed to stumble into something interesting, weird, or morally questionable. The only real downside is stability. Even with the mods, this thing can still fall over like a pensioner on black ice. My advice, save often, save compulsively. The only reason it's not higher on my list is simple. There's no nostalgia here. I didn't grow up with Fallout. If I had, this most certainly would have been an S tier. So out of pure respect, and because it's one of the best RPGs ever made, I'm giving it an S tier anyway. It's a weird, self-indulgent, post-apocalyptic walking simulator, and I absolutely love it. After years of actively avoiding Kojima games, Death Stranding somehow worms its way into my soul. A game about a glorified postman has no business being this high on my list, and yet here we all are. This is not a game you rush, it's a game you commit to. You walk, slowly, uphill, in the fucking rain, constantly wondering why you didn't just play something with a gun. And then, somewhere between your 20th mountain climb and your 5th catastrophic faceplant, it clicks. This isn't about parcels, it's about connections, isolation, grief, persistence, and carrying on when the world has very clearly given up. Now the atmosphere is doing Olympic levels of heavy lifting here. Vast, empty landscapes, weather that actively hates you, music that kicks in when you're emotionally vulnerable enough for it to hurt you, and Kojima goes full Kojima here, strange, symbolic, confusing at times, but never careless. The game trusts you to sit with its ideas, and slowly, what starts as, what the hell is this, becomes, oh, this is actually quite sincere. Gameplay wise, yes, you deliver packages, and yes, that is exactly why it works. Managing your balance, planning routes, building roads and bridges, leaving signs for strangers you'll never meet. It creates a quiet, communal feeling that's oddly moving. Combat exists, technically, but survival, patience, and problem solving are the real stars here. Yes, I fell over with 200 kilograms of cargo like a confused turtle. Yes, I bonded emotionally with a baby in a jar, but I also enjoyed pissing on ghosts. Kojima wins. Not quite S tier because it's a bit wanky for most people's taste, but it's a very, very, very solid A tier. Well played. Zombies are usually not my thing. Days Gone, however, absolutely is. You're a biker in a brutal post-apocalypse. Your bike needs fuel, it needs fixing, and everything wants to eat you. It's a simple setup, executed far better than it ever got credit for. This game had me glued for hours. The world hits hard, the story keeps throwing curveballs, and the ending actually lands, which is rare for an open world game. There's real payoff here. And the post-game is pure dopamine. Clearing ambush camps, methodically wiping hundreds of zombies off the map, it feels incredible. The combat loop just works. Sure, it's a little rough in places, I hit a few bugs, but nothing game-breaking. Just enough to remind yourself that this wasn't Sony's golden child. But honestly, this game deserves better. Strong story, satisfying gameplay, jaw-dropping environments, and riding your bike through it all is an absolute pleasure. You can't spell shitload of zombies without an S. S tier. Now let's get this out of the way. Metroidvania equals instant erection for me, every time. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a visual masterpiece, a glorious, emotional, mechanically perfect sequel that understands exactly what it needs to be. The first Ori was already excellent. You'd think the sequel would just coast. Instead, it improves almost everything. Movement, combat, bosses, scope, and emotional weight. Without losing what made the original special. The art is breathtaking, the music devastating, the traversal is pure joy. Some of the boss fights will absolutely ruin your evening, especially on hard, but I loved every second of it. I even let my 4-year-old son watch parts of me playing it. He loved it. Almost certainly because of the pretty colours, and not the themes of loss and sacrifice. But still. This is how you make a sequel, everybody. S tier. Every day of the week. And here we are. Finally, the best game that I played in 2024. If you've skipped to this point, welcome. And without further ado, Viewfinder is a puzzle game that casually rewires your brain. You take a photo, line it up with the world, and then step directly into the picture. That's the mechanic, and somehow it never stops being incredible. I love puzzle games. Give me a shooter where I have to solve a Sudoku to reload, and I'm in. Viewfinder goes further. It doesn't just challenge your logic, it makes you question reality itself. The puzzles escalate beautifully, and as they grow, you grow with them. The visuals are constantly varied, the ideas never wear thin, and the game trusts you to figure things out as you go and never feels cruel. By the end, I was convinced this wasn't made by humans, but by some higher intelligence that simply hates straight lines. If you haven't played Viewfinder yet, fix that immediately. Treat yourself, you've earned it. An effortless S tier, and deserved number 1. Well, butter my arse, micro-reviewing 50 video games is absolutely exhausting. But that's it, every game I played in 2024 ranked. Thanks again for appeasing my OCD and letting me work on the years that you're probably less interested in. Next up's going to be my list for 2025, and why not, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the double tier list, or if you want to switch things up for the next video. What do you think of my favourite game of the year? Did I get the order wrong? Also, subscribe if you enjoyed this, and if you hated it as well. Catch you in the next one. Peace out, bitches.